That siren you hear in the background is because we're live here on the Dick Tracy Show.
You
Quick,
remember the theme
quick!
song? It's called
Where? Do 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 do
No, that's
do.
that's great.
Somebody just when I went do, somebody shot a firework outside. Sound like a gunshot.
Remember the Dick Tracy, the opening Dick Tracy.
Dick
Dun,
Tracy.
dun, dun, dun,
Dick
dun, dun.
Tracy to Hemlock Holmes. Dick Tracy to Hemlock Holmes.
I hear you, Mr. Tracy.
Was it Hemlock Holmes and the Retouchables? Were the Keystone Cops that used to ride with him?
Right.
The Retouchables, I think they called them.
Well, there was the Untouchables, which is of course.
Well, that's a class thing.
Non-touchables.
No, I think it was the Retouchables, if I remember correctly. And then there was, of course, Beady Eyes and Flat Top.
Right.
And then there was Mumbles. Listen. What he say? Him say? Yeah. No,
No. What it was is he would say something, and then who was it? Who was his accomplice?
Mumbles?
He would always say,
wasn't it Itchy?
No, whoever was with Mumbles. Mumbles would go like, blah, 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 and the other guy would say, "You're right, Mumbles," as if I understood what he said.
Oh God, yes.
There was a take on that. The Go Gophers, remember?
Yeah.
They were on the Underdog show.
Right.
You know, blah, 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 blah. Oh, good idea.
Good idea. Somebody's shooting fireworks here tonight. I don't know why. I got the window open, so that's why you could hear everything. All Joe right. Cioffi and Joe Rao tonight on the always lively, always fascinating, always filled with so many interesting little facts, the Joe and Joe Weather Show. Hey, severe weather last night. There was actually quite a bit of thunderstorm activity. I got some pretty hefty rain for a little while early this morning. I was too lazy to look out the window to see if there was any lightning or if I couldn't hear any thunder, but I was half in the bag anyway. But a few people pointed out to me that was the case.
Well, I was not awake this morning when we did get. I mean, I think at 4:00 in the morning I woke up and looked out the window, and the driveway was a little wet. So I said, well, there you go. We have some precipitation, and now we're going into a clearing mode for a little while tonight. It looks like we'll have.
I broke out into sunshine here about 1 or 2 o'clock this afternoon. It didn't really do much good with respect to the temperatures, but because I had mostly a northeast wind, but we still actually turned out to be a fairly nice afternoon, even though it was on the cool side.
Well, it was about 50 or 52 here, and then the sun broke out here about mid-afternoon. Up went the temperature, and we peaked at 61. Here in the Valley of Putnam this afternoon.
So we've got a lot of severe weather going on tonight in parts of the Ohio Valley. There's some activity going on right now in North Carolina. We're going to take a look at that. And then, of course, right on schedule, just as I was starting to write my evening forecast for my website, SPC, and I kind of figured they would do this. They actually changed the forecast. They upgraded the forecast to an extent tomorrow. They expanded the geography a little bit. So now, give me 1 second. I'll bring it up on the screen, folks. Okay. Nope, that's Joe. We already have him. Hold on. Oh, here we go. Oh, I'm all drained out. But we do have their updated forecast here with a marginal risk of severe weather. Now, I think tomorrow morning they may actually wind up sticking a small area of slight risk in there, probably down in maybe eastern Virginia or eastern North Carolina. But it's marginal risk from North Carolina all the way up to Massachusetts and extending west back into the Catskills, eastern Pennsylvania, down, cuts Virginia. It's mostly the eastern half of Virginia, but a little bit bigger than what they were showing earlier today.
Right. And the one thing I like now about the day 2, it used to be only available on day 1, but on day 2 now they provide you with the odds for a tornado or gusty winds or hail. And it seems that we are in line, Joe, tomorrow in the marginal zone for hail, for wind, but not a tornado. So
Right.
there's no
5% chance of each, wind and hail. There's a 30% chance down in Texas where we've got a small area of enhanced risk
mhm,
that looks like it covers Austin, San Antonio, northwest of Houston. And by the way, let's not neglect tonight because tonight's very, very busy with a very large area of enhanced risk. And I can already see it pretty busy on the radar in North Carolina. I'm sorry, in much of Illinois, southern Indiana, all of Kentucky, virtually all of Tennessee, eastern Missouri, northeastern Arkansas in an enhanced risk. And you can see the uh, slight risk area is also quite large. It covers a number of states, and that extends, by the way, that finger. I have to be impressed with SPC if only because of the fact that they stuck this finger. You see that finger that sticks into North Carolina,
right.
and if you look at the radar right now, it's kind of justified because there's this sort of renegade line of heavy thunderstorms and severe thunderstorms that are now moving out of Southern Virginia and heading into North Carolina. And take a look at the area, by the way, back in Illinois. Now this is the weather system, the low and the cold front that are swinging eastward. This is going to be the driver. So you should will probably look for this area to actually expand as we go into the overnight hours. This is going to be one of those instances, Joe, where the thunderstorms are actually going to happen at night in areas of Indiana, Ohio, into western Pennsylvania, and they may get here by daybreak. So it's a little bit. The storms that we're going to get tomorrow are not going to come with the maximum time of daytime heating, but there's enough energy and a strong enough shortwave trough, I believe, that justifies the risk zones that SPC has put up.
And you're mentioning of the fact that some of these storms will, in the Midwest, Illinois, Indiana, hit during the overnight hours, kind of reminds me a few days before we had that blizzard in 1982, April the 6th. On April the 3rd, 1982, there was a very, very sharp cold front that was moving into Illinois and Indiana, and I was doing a radio station. I was based here in New York, but I was using a Comrex microphone where I used to do stations outside of the New York area. There was one station I was doing at that time was WRIN in Rensselaer, Indiana. I had the home phone number of the owner of the station, a little 1,000-watt radio station in Indiana. They came on at sunrise, they went off at sunset, and I remember it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I saw a very strong line. Now we didn't have back then, or I did not have back then access to what we are so used to today, color radar.
Yes, yes.
So what we had to do, we had to take a plexiglass or a plastic map that had grid lines on it, and you would take literally the radar information. They were in numerical form: level one, level two, level three. I think the highest was level six, and there was like a line of level six storms heading right for Rensselaer. Who knows? There could even have been a tornado embedded in that. And I called the owner of the station up to warn him about this. I said, this is a very serious situation. The FCC has special rules where, in cases of life and limb and property damage at stake, you can fire up your radio station, even though it's a daytimer at night. He ran to the radio station, he turned the station on, and we started doing updates on the movement of these storms. One actually did spawn a tornado, some of these supercells, and caused like a $250,000 of damage in the city of or the town of Rensselaer. And then later on, it moved off, and they were, people were proclaiming, WRAN saved us, and it was a nice feeling. But right after that cold front moved through, it got cold really,
Really
really
quick.
fast. In fact, they were supposed to have an exhibition game at Wrigley Field in Chicago. This was just before the baseball season started between the Cubs and the White Sox. The game was called because the temperature at game time was like 20 degrees, and there was like moderate snow falling. And just hours earlier, it was like in the 60s to near 70, and then that front arrived with all of that severe weather. So that it could be a scary thing when you have this kind of weather that they may be seeing tonight in that zone at night.
Sure.
Tornadoes and severe thunderstorms. There's nothing more frightening. And even a couple of times here, my wife and I, we woke up, we were scared because you could hear the winds howling, and you don't know
Oh
what's
yeah,
going to
some of the
happen.
ones at night sometimes it can be really vicious.
Yeah,
You
I,
know?
and you listen for this famous sound of a freight train.
Right.
You know,
Exactly. Well, I
yeah,
just pulled up Raleigh Durham's radar because they have some severe thunderstorm warnings working right now. By the way, folks, if you're watching this on we're live at 7:12 p.m. Eastern time. So if you're watching this later on this evening or during the overnight, remember that what you're seeing radar and satellite wise and other information is probably dated to an extent. Certainly the radars and satellites are. So be sure to, if you want to get your any updated severe weather information, to go to your local National Weather Service forecast office page, and you can find that by going to weather.gov and just click on your geography, and it'll bring up the your local office. But some very big cells here, just passing just northeast of Raleigh Durham and moving southeastward. There's another big group of cells just moved out of Martinsville, Virginia, and have moved just north and west of Greensboro, north and east of Greensboro, and that whole complex just continues to slide onto the southeast.
yeah.
I'm gonna go bring back the other radar because I want
Hence,
to.
hence the reason for the finger.
Yes, and in Illinois, you can see some of these big cells that are running in central Illinois now, moving eastward. So those are the cells, Joe. You was used that whole area is going to be moving into Indiana and Ohio, and again, a lot of those thunderstorms are going to impact that area over at night. I'm going to jump to the satellite loop, and you see that the weather conditions actually did try to improve to the east. I don't want to leave out the fact that there are some showers, by the way, moving through southern New Jersey right now. I forgot to mention that. Let me just see if I can bring that radar shot back up. And you can see them here. There are just a couple of showers. Looks like there might be a heavier shower in there. Little cluster moving southeastward at a fairly good clip. Those are going to be offshore shortly if they aren't offshore already. This radar loop tends to run about 15 minutes behind, so it's more than likely that most of those cells have passed offshore. But you can see, Joe, on the satellite tonight, that the cloud blowups on the visible here, the high cloud tops are really standing out in Illinois and also in the Carolinas and also down into parts of Texas. I'm sorry. Hang on, let me let the loop do its thing here. I thought I saw that there might have been some cells going on down in Louisiana and Texas. Let's bring that radar back up. Actually, no, a little bit further to the east. It looks like there now there's a complex here moving across central Alabama and central Georgia, and that's that other area of risk that SPC. That's part of the area of risk that SPC has. It's a very large area tonight with respect to severe weather, but everything seems to be moving along. So we got this cold front coming. And by the way, look on the lower left. On the lower left, you could see the upper low that's been pounding Southern California with heavy rains for the last several days now. Just continues to spin away, waiting for something to kick it inland. That is going to be the seedling for what could be a major storm in the eastern half of the United States late Easter Sunday and going into Sunday night and Monday.
Right, and thankfully that storm that you just alluded to for Easter is going to hold off until well after dark on Easter Sunday. So the daylight hours of Easter Sunday and allowing for people to travel back home after the holiday that evening. But then I think later on that night, after midnight, and on into the first part of Monday at least, we may be looking at a storm that could dump in a quick time, maybe as much as 2 or more inches in and around the tri-state metropolitan area.
And we also have, I think, we're going to see some wind issues here on Friday. We talked about that yesterday with the after this cold front goes by because the gradient does get very tight.
Yes, indeed. In fact, tomorrow there may be a brief burst of wind. I see the National Weather Service, specifically for the New York metropolitan area, has a wind advisory posted from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m.
Oh, they
But
did put it up?
for tomorrow,
Okay.
in the immediate New York area, not for much of Long Island or the Hudson Valley, but I mean right center in New York City, they have a wind advisory. I'm not quite sure what was the I didn't read the technical discussion off of the Upton site as to why they did that, but my personal feelings are that we'll probably see in the aftermath of the frontal passage tomorrow in the afternoon a general 30 plus knot wind, mile per hour wind blowing, and I think the winds will be even a bit stronger than that on Friday. And I would not even rule out the possibility on Friday, especially north of the 84 corridor, of some snow showers and flurries showing up.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. I think that that's going to be the case. Let me just show everybody the next 7 days. WP's the Weather Prediction Center actually, and this will include any storm that develops for Sunday night and Monday. Some very substantial rainfalls on the order of 3 to 5 inches in a large stripe across the southeastern states. But even showing it for parts of northern New Jersey and southern New England, as you mentioned, Joe, that being a pretty solid rainmaker for Sunday night into Monday, combining with whatever we get tomorrow morning with this cold front. But some solid rains up and down the eastern seaboard of up to 2 to 3 inches over the next 7 days. So we are going into a pretty wet forecast period here. And here's I'm gonna bring up the upper air. By the way, that wind advisory, as you said, only covers the five boroughs of New York City, northern Nassau County, okay, southern Nassau County, so Nassau County on Long Island, and eastern Essex County and Hudson County. That's it.
Right, right.
And Eastern Union.
But I have a feeling that we may be seeing a wind advisory, a more widespread advisory being posted either late tomorrow night or for Friday, because I think Friday we're going to be seeing a bit stronger gusty wind. The winds tomorrow are going to be more or less from the west, um, or they will become west in the afternoon after a light south southeasterly breeze in the morning, and then on Friday look for west northwesterlies. And I've got 15 to 25 with gusts to over 40 miles an hour on Friday. So Friday's going to be a pretty busy day in the wind department as well.
Mm-hmm. So I got the upper air just to show everybody the players going forward. Of course, we've got this this blocking high that's sitting up in well up north between Labrador and Greenland. You've got an upper low near Newfoundland. You have another upper low back across South Central Canada, near Lake Winnipeg. Then you have that cutoff low that I pointed out in Southern California. This is a pattern that displaces cold air to the south. It's also because of the time of year, with the very strong April sun that we have, that actually provides a little bit of extra juice when it comes to the thunderstorms that are going to develop. You've got all this cold air aloft and the sun kind of going to work on it, very unstable air. So these severe weather outbreaks that we're getting, pretty interesting, really, when you think about it, because of the fact that they are, you might see something, it's not often that you see SPC painting a dozen states in the eastern part of the United States into an enhanced area of severe weather like they did tonight. But here's that upper trough that's swinging into the east for Thursday and Friday. That's some very, very cold air aloft. It's a very sharp trough that comes through on Friday. That lifts up. And now, of course, you see what happens here. That Southern California shortwave, folks, keep an eye on that because that's going to get kicked eastward. And you're going to see this shortwave get kicked eastward, and then you're going to see this energy coming down from Canada that's going to basically phase with this. And going into Saturday, you see that northern stream energy just overwhelms, picks up the southern stream, and starts to lift it up and sharpens it up as it goes into the Great Lakes and into Canada. So this looks like it could be a fairly powerful, this is a very powerful looking trough at this time of year. I've seen deeper troughs and sharper troughs, But when you have a trough air this cold aloft this time of year, and a jet stream dropping down as far south as this one is, it's a solid ingredients here for some heavy rain, some heavy thunderstorms, and some severe weather with the system that we're going to be dealing with for Sunday night and into Monday.
And let's not forget, Joe, we're looking ahead in the coming days ahead, but let's also look to our north because it looks like tomorrow night and into early Friday, northern sections of New England, well, most notably, I think the White Mountains of New Hampshire and virtually the entire state of Maine is going to get blitzed with a snowstorm on the order of maybe 6 to 10 or 6 to 12 inches.
Oh, totally agree with that. Totally agree.
And in fact, some of the highest terrain of the Longfellow Mountains of central Maine, like Mount Katahdin, which I believe they say is the first place in the eastern United States, first place in the United States to see the sun up. That mountain is almost exactly 1 mile high at 5,280 some odd feet, and up there, it wouldn't be surprising to hear of a snow amount if anybody's up there of maybe like 18 inches. So they're gonna get quite a snowstorm, and I looked at this and I said, boy, that's really gonna be great spring skiing. And then all of a sudden, I said, wait a minute, ain't nobody going skiing, whether it's
No,
good weather or bad weather.
no.
Nobody gonna
And,
be
and
able to
by the
ski.
way, if you look at the pattern going forward later next week,
Yeah,
deep trough in the east, another powerhouse system coming into California that drops down into Texas and starts to move eastward, and then of course you've got the whole trough in Canada in the east just sharpens up again. So there could be probably another storm to follow, maybe late next week or next weekend, the way this is going. And that block, by the way, is pretty formidable. It stays blocky right through the next 2 weeks. So it's a shame for snow lovers. This would have been ideal. At least you would have gotten maybe a couple of chances out of this. But again, the time of year just sort of eliminates all possibilities except for as you mentioned, you're going to see it in Maine and in Vermont and New Hampshire. I'll bring up the NAM because the NAM Joe today actually did a like you said, wiped out with snow. You can see it here, so we'll roll it along. Here's your frontal boundary development with thunderstorms overnight into tomorrow morning, and then all of a sudden you got all this dark blue snow with a 76 low tomorrow night sitting in the Gulf of Maine. All of Maine is in solid dark blue heavy snow. Yeah, this is crazy. And then of course Friday you got the gradients tight. Saturday looks good. Of the 2 weekend days, I would probably Saturday's definitely I think the better of the 2 weekend days, and then it should be sunshine from start to finish. And then you start to get into Sunday, where Easter Sunday, I think the daytime will be dry, but then you've got this next low is moving out. And by the way, I think for Sunday, one of the things to watch out for folks that are in the southeast in this area here, I think Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Eastern Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia. I think this is going to be an area ripe for severe weather because very warm air is going to be getting juiced up the eastern seaboard around this developing low that's back over in Illinois.
right, right. And yeah, of the two of the upcoming weekend, I'd say that Saturday is going to be the sunnier, albeit the much cooler and even breezier day. Not much wind on Sunday, a bit milder, maybe mid to upper 50s to near 60 in the lower Hudson Valley. The thing about Sunday, I think we're going to be seeing quite a bit of cloud cover almost from the get-go.
Probably, yeah.
Certainly the cloudier, albeit milder day, Easter Sunday, and then, as we said, holding off until late Sunday night for the possibility of some really wet
Yeah,
weather.
yeah. The new GFS actually is a little faster. It actually brings the rain in here um, between 8 p.m. and midnight Sunday night, and then it's gone by 8 a.m. Sunday morning. The back edge is at New York City, so by 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, it's already long gone to the northeast, and weather conditions starting to improve Monday afternoon. If you want to believe it's timing, I didn't look too as very closely with regards to the timing on this, but it does at least seem to be a system that's just going to move in. We're getting the really long occlusion that's going to be coming through, so we'll get hit with some heavy rains and some thunderstorms, and then it'll go by, and uh, we'll probably cool down a bit as we move into the middle part of next week.
Yeah, just man, do you think that we have a shot? I've been hearing a lot of forecasts that are saying that we're going to hit 70 on Monday.
You know, it's not impossible, if only because of the fact that you've got a west wind. So if this rain gets out of here around, let's say if it's out of here by 8 o'clock in the morning and we break out into sunshine by noon, you know how the colder air is really kind of still hanging back in the Great Lakes. There's probably a second trough that has to go by. So you know what? Since if we're going to see temperatures Sunday night, you've got southerly isobars up the East Coast. There doesn't look like there'll be any really solid marine air that'll be holding firm. So if we're in the 50s Sunday night, I don't think it'll take very much if we break out into a few hours of sunshine Monday afternoon that somebody will go to 70, and then it'll turn colder after that.
Yeah, and that's the key, sunshine, as was the case today. I said, in fact, the last couple of days I was talking about the fact that we may not even break out of the 50s today. And I said the one caveat is, will we break it out into sunshine? If we do, up go the temperatures. Sure enough, we broke out into the sun and we jumped into the 60s. So the big thing about Monday will be, can we break out into some sunshine later in the day? I agree with you. Then we may have a shot at 70. If we stay cloudy and dreary, and we certainly will be that as or to kick off the day on Monday. Then we may only stay in the 60s on Monday afternoon.
By the way, a couple of things to point out before I come full screen, as far as the hazards that are concerned tonight. You know, you mentioned uh, Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. Much of Maine is already under a winter storm warning. There are some counties as you go further south in Maine toward the coast where we do have winter storm watches up. I'm sorry, winter weather advisories up, and there are winter storm watches up for northeastern New Hampshire and northernmost Vermont. There's no winter storm warnings up for, I'm sorry, northwest New Hampshire, northeast Vermont. Winter storm warning up for northeastern New. Okay, let me start this again. So, a winter storm warning for northeastern New Hampshire, a winter storm watch for northwestern New Hampshire, and a winter storm watch for northeastern Vermont. We still have, by the way, some coastal flood issues going on uh, in um, in areas from the Delmarva Peninsula all the way up to Maine. So coastal flood advisories are up for the next round of high tides, and that's because of that lovely, lovely, lovely full moon that we had last night, which
Right.
I took a.
In fact, as I said, even though the time of perigee, the time when it is closest to the Earth, came yesterday, that depending upon the topography of the coastline, depending upon where you happen to be, the highest tides, the highest range of tides, necessarily do not coincide with the time of perigee, but they come 1 to 3 days later. And in fact, I can give you an example. Boston will not be seeing their highest tide until Friday, good 3 days after perigee. That's just the way the coastline is and the way the water interacts with the region. Uh,
Right.
I think here in New York, will see our highest tides, or maybe we did already today, or maybe it's tomorrow at the Battery. So
Which is in
regardless, I
Lower
think we're very
Manhattan, for those of
we're
you who
very
don't know.
fortunate that we don't have, as we had last week, a massive offshore coastal storm, because then we'd really be seeing a lot of major flooding and maybe even some major beach erosion. But thankfully, we don't have to deal with that. But the waters are going to be high enough anyway, thanks to old Mr. Moon.
Yes, exactly. Old Mr. Moon. Never heard it put quite that way.
Well,
Um, I'm
good
just
night, Moon.
correct. So I'm just checking here to see what we have message wise. First of all, a big hello to everybody that's joined the show late. We're starting to get notifications going back out apparently, so
Yeah.
that's a good thing. We also want to wish everybody tonight is Passover, the beginning of Passover. So to all our Jewish friends, a happy and holy Passover to you. Scott Briller, the chairman, you could ask, you could answer a question about the president, or you about presidents, or you can take a weather question, or you could do both. So which would you like?
Well, first of all, let me apologize to Scott Briller because he sounded uh, not annoyed or agitated, but he was wondering about the fact that he gave me a question to give to you on Sunday, a double Jeopardy Briller question, and he was questioning the fact that I didn't mention it on Sunday.
Oh, okay.
Bless you. Uh,
She does sneezes. Can she do like a cackle or a witch's laugh?
I just hope that she did it this way when she
Oh,
sneezed.
you must be at social distancing. And your little dog too. Oh God. Okay,
I,
so
I'll take the weather question.
okay,
You
so
said it
the
was a question about the president.
about presidents.
Oh, okay. Oh, precedence.
No, Presidents, like
President.
it's, as in
Yeah.
the United States.
Oh, that president.
Yes.
Oh, those presidents.
Those presidents. We'll do
All right.
that in a minute. Okay, so first off, um, Caribou, Maine had its highest has an average of 109 inches of snow in a winter. So what was the most ever recorded and the least ever recorded?
The least ever recorded. You know how I'm going to do this, Joe? Because I think the highest ever at Central Park was 75, and the lowest was like 3.
Right.
So I'm going to say, let's see, 10% would have been a 5%. So what the hmm. So the average is what, 100 for
One,
Caribou?
109.
109. Da, 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 da.
Your logic, I know where your
All right.
logic is correct. Go on.
I'm going to say Caribou. The lowest amount was something like 10 or 12 inches.
Believe it or not, I thought you were going to get it when you said that Central Park's highest was 75, and maybe you were going to shave off a few inches, because
Yeah,
really you only need to shave off a few inches. Apparently, their lowest ever was 68.
68 inches.
Yeah,
So they never ever in
that
most.
seems a little high, though. I would have thought it would have been maybe in the 30s.
I mean, that's more than twice the amount that we would get
But he
down
says
here.
68, so we'll that's what we go with. And what do you think the highest?
The highest, the highest. Huh.
And I believe this was set, by the way, only a couple of years ago. The highest ever recorded.
I will say 170 inches.
196.
196.
Now, the president's question is: who was the first president ever to be born in a hospital?
Do you know?
Oh,
Uh,
wait. Let me make sure I said that correctly. Hold on. Yeah, who was the first president to be born in a hospital?
um, I don't. Who would be the
I'll
first one?
give you a hint. You don't have to go as far back as you think.
How about William Howard Taft?
No, not that far.
Oh, but not that far, for God's. That's
No,
too
no, no.
far.
It would be a president that we would have had like in the 60s.
In the
something.
60s?
Yeah.
Mrs. Rayo is getting the general idea of this.
Yeah.
Was it Eisenhower?
No, you got to come up a little later than that. Believe it or not.
In the 60s.
No. You got to come up a little later.
In the 70s?
Yes.
Ooh.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And he still walks this earth, building
Wow.
building houses in Georgia.
Jimmy Carter.
Jimmy Carter. Yes.
Wow.
Well, I just want to say the problem is not 6.5% inflation. That's just a piece of paper.
It's Billy.
The problem is
Billy's the problem. Those of you who aren't old enough, you all the shenanigans that everybody gets wrapped up in with President Trump's family members and so on. They actually pale by comparison with the shenanigans of the Carter family and Billy Carter.
Oh,
Remember?
Billy Carter. Billy Carter. He was fodder for Johnny Carson and every stand-up comic back in the mid and late 70s.
Oh yeah. So this sort of stuff's been going on
Remember
forever.
Billy Beer?
What's that?
Billy Beer.
That was Billy Beer. That's right.
Right.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, David Schwartz says that Kennedy wasn't born in a hospital. No, he wasn't. Apparently not. Jimmy Carter. Well, that's not unusual. Kennedy was born what in the late 20s,
1917.
1917. They birthed at home. Even if you had money, you gave birth at home.
The issue
In
is
fact, just to tell you,
issues
so
a rate of economic growth, and therefore, I believe that 25 to 35 is not completely out of accord when financial deficit
yeah,
on hand.
so you can go ahead and have your allowance increase,
Caroline.
Caroline. Yes. um, no, the odd thing is because my very close friend of mine is very much into ancestry, so he's been doing all sorts of he does family research, and he's been doing mine. And what's a common thread, starting with my mother's brothers and sisters and my grandparents on both sides, their birthdays do not match the birthdays on their birth certificates, because in those days in Italy, the midwife, she would only go to the town records to file the records. She would go maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks. So if you were born, let's call it at the beginning of a new cycle, where she had just come from the town of records. So my mother's birthday is actually the 16th, but in reality she was born a week earlier than that. And my grandmother, the same thing. Her birth dates don't match up with what she said her birth date was, and
Right.
and her actual birthday. It was off by 6 days.
I believe I remember correctly. My grandmother on my mother's side, she was born on January 31st, but I think either the birth certificate or some certificate said she was born on February the 10th, and we always found that to be like an oddity.
That was the day probably that the midwife went to the town. Also, in some Italian towns, Italian towns, they didn't really they waited like a month for a number of reasons, and then they would wait for you to bring the baby to be baptized.
My wife wants to chime in here with her.
Yeah,
Yes, please do, Mrs. Rayo. You know you're always welcome.
my dad said the same thing to me a long time ago, that the midwife would get to it when she got to it.
I'll
Yeah.
get around to
And
it.
he was born in 37, and so that was occurring in this country too back then.
Oh yeah. Well, they were still home births were prior. It wasn't until probably during World War II. Well, they started, women started, doing more hospital births in the teens and 20s, but it was probably after the Depression that, the hospital births, and certainly in the late 40s and 50s, uh, that hospital births were just about everywhere.
Yeah, so and Renata is of German extraction. We were talking about Italy, but maybe it was a thing throughout most of Europe, most European countries. And
Hmm.
for it's interesting. That's I don't know how we got onto this particular. Oh yeah, that's because of the Briller Jeopardy question.
Right.
So
So, and that's all there is to it. Um, God bless Christina Peter. Her granddad's going to be 96. I was very fortunate because I had my grandparents till I was into my 30s. So
right.
that was I was very I always say that is a very lucky thing that I had, and I want my grandchildren to be able to say the same thing, because if they can say the same thing, I'll be pushing mid to upper 90s.
I saw Halley's Comet in 1986. I was 30 years old. The comet is due back in 2061. For me to see it again a second time, I will have to attain the age of 105 years old. That is something for me to shoot for.
Well, you know what? These days, more and more people are living past the age of 100. So,
And
listen, do it if for only one reason, is to spite Social Security. Because they're banking on you and I to leave this earth early so they can keep all that money.
Right.
Okay. So yeah, we'll show them. You and I will bankrupt Medic.
Well, I'm not going.
That's right. We're booked for many years.
Exactly.
Okay. So anyway, let's call it a night. I'm tired.
Yeah, but it's a funny thing, Joe. I was just as tired and as worn down, and I really didn't do very much today. I don't know why I was kind of like, yeah. But this this little the last 40 minutes kind of perked me up. So thank you and thank everybody for watching.
No, thank you everybody for watching as well, and we'll see you tomorrow at the usual weather time, 7 o'clock Eastern, with Joe and I. And have a great night. Remember to continue your social distancing.
Yes,
You know, on just one last note, at least when it comes to certain people, you're going to find that you're probably going to want to continue social distancing in all forms once this is all over with. By the way, did you happen to see my post this morning about um, it was driving me crazy. So when I saw somebody post this, I had to take it and use it for my own post. So people have been putting up this stuff. It's like, show me the fifth picture on your camera on your phone and
I
on
saw
it.
that. Yes,
So you
yeah.
saw what I put,
The third
the
picture.
third picture, and then to do something with that third picture.
Yes,
Which, being a family show, we don't want to tell you what that was to do with it. You can
exactly,
you can figure it out. All
exactly.
right, have a great night, and we'll see you tomorrow. Good night, Joe.
Night night.
Good night, everybody.